Yes, yes, ladies and gentle people, it's that special time again. So, welcome one, welcome all. Benvenuti, as we would say in Italian. This is your friendly Euphoria, streaming to you from a wonderfully stormy, wet, and rainy evening here in South Africa. What a beautiful, beautiful place. It shouldn't be raining this time of year, but nonetheless, it's always welcome to have a good watering. This evening, we are going to be bringing you, as part of the Prime Matter podcast, our weekly story time. We did have two story times this week to make up for just being cut off by ESCOM here and there. We're against the clock this evening, but we should finish up in time, so it shouldn't be a problem. Our program tonight will be going for about 90 minutes, 2 hours, give or take. And it is my pleasure to be hosting you this evening. For those of you that don't know what we do here on a Sunday night, we have this good old-fashioned platform to talk about very, very, let's say, interesting things. And when I say interesting, I mean not only interesting, but super important, because the things we talk about, although there's an element of history in it and an element of politics, and in between there's this giant mystery when we squish the two together, there is great knowledge to be had in unpacking these little factoids. Most people will know a couple of these things. It's good banter at the bar, so to speak. But very few people have had the time to really dig into it, or, like myself, study some of this stuff through political science and things like that. So, for me, foreign policy and just policy in general, whether domestic or international, is basically what is the official plan that our leaders put together for us. And so it's always funny when we look at these policy documents, I like to think of them as, we see that there is a lot of very, very interesting things. And for those of you that have never joined us, you will see that we've touched on pretty much everything here in Storytime. So it's called Storytime because I'm not here to try and convince you of anything. Not here to try and make a documentary debunking anything. I'm just having fun with all the little bits and pieces of information that I know and gladly share with you, because, we're all, I guess, running around, living our lives, working, raising families, whatever it is, and it's not always easy to put the dots together and to really make a clear picture. For those of you that are good listeners of, let me just put it this way. If you are listening to podcasts that involve Daniel Schmachtenberger, and he's been on many different kinds, if you listen to those kinds of podcasts and you follow the thinking of Daniel Schmachtenberger, then you'll have a really great piece of information, because he says, and I think rightfully so, when looking at a signal is basically just a burst of information. As a start, it has a finish. The signal of information that you get can sometimes be very noisy and not really have like a true message. Let's just call it that, I guess, an interpretation of something intelligible. And it's important that as we go forward in life, especially now, as the world gets crazier by the week, so to speak, that we not only keep our eye on the ball, but we, as Schmachtenberger says, continue to make a higher resolution image of our reality, and not just absorbing tons and tons and tons of information, or not absorbing any information at all. It's important to find a good balance and form he basically says we brush our teeth 3 times a day, but we don't take the time to really curate the information that we understand. And so it's important to have good information, and it's also important to curate that, have a higher resolution, higher information density picture of the world. So that's a high ladder to climb for good old story time. But we will try. At least I'll make it entertaining along the way. How's that? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This, I suppose, would be episode or chapter 8 of Story Time. And as you know, at the moment, we're kind of trying to sink our teeth into this whole thing that sometimes people collectively call the deep state. And at the same time, I'm also trying to ground us in having a look at really what is something as amazingly complex as the American military. What is a special access program? Who runs these things? What is the interface between elected officials, i.e. civilians, and military people? And that now blurry line between the two, where we have civilians that are military contractors. And so what are they exactly? Are they part of the military industrial complex? Definitely they are, but are they also people with families in the suburbs that you would never guess have access to these amazing technologies? The latter is also true. So Storytime 6, which was our previous it was the previous subject. It carried through to Storytime 7. So the two of these together basically gave us this very clear message that we'll follow from this evening. And this evening we're going to be looking at basically this tension between secrecy and disclosure, and at the final end, this thing called continuation of government. And as I was saying, Storytime 6 and 7 basically went to great pains to point out to everyone how even the congressional hearings, the Senate hearings, where military experts like Kirkpatrick, Dr. Sean M. Kirkpatrick, came to give testimony, and he's the how is that? Just this week, the position has opened up for head of the Advanced Aerospace Research Program. So if any of you have defense contracting capabilities and large amounts of clearance, go apply to the military industrial complex. They're looking for someone to head their special operations at the moment. And that's pretty much Storytime 7. We looked at all the programs, RO, ORSAP, ATIP, the AATFP task force, and a bunch of the others. So there's a big opening to supervise all of that. The director of the Advanced Aerospace Research Anomalies has now become vacant this week. But before it was this Mr. Kirkpatrick, Dr. Kirkpatrick. And Dr. Kirkpatrick basically informed a whole bunch of Congress people at the Senate subcommittee on armed services, and he showed them some videos of some UFOs, basically, and then he gave some testimony, and at the end of that, he was like, well, we're not going to rule out the alien possibility, but until we say they're alien, they're not alien, but we don't know what they are. And we immediately, obviously, called bullshit to all of that. Excuse my French. We basically said, hold on a sec. This is now the public, you and I, the viewers, and myself, and anyone with a little bit of memory on what actually has transpired in the last, let's call it 80 years. You will see that there have been so many leaked documents. So many leaked documents. And people of high caliber coming forward and testifying. I mean, we're talking people who are not only researching these technologies, but at the same time keeping them secret. So we looked at the counterintelligence aspect, and we looked at the deep secrecy, and how JFK, for example, was rubbing up against all of this, and the kind of deep event that happened with him, probably because of his desire to share this kind of information with the Soviet counterparts at the time and make a joint moon operation. We'll look into that in another story time, but let's not get too far off the track. I just want to say, story time 6 and 7 basically says that the government pandering to the public and saying to the military, please, after years of lying to us, will you give us answers? And in a sense, the government themselves also being read into the secrecy by the military themselves. So it's all kind of filtered and sanitized, and they forget that this has all happened before. Not only through leaked documents, but through previous hearings and public funded private initiatives like the NICAP and what was then also help me out here, people. The Aerial Phenomena Research Society. So that was the ARO, not the AARO that has just become vacant. So these were privately funded and had really high caliber people working for them. In fact, tell you what, let's start there. Let's cast our mind back to this point where we're trying to say that the government now are asking questions about UFOs and the military being apparently the authority saying what's what, who's lied to us all this time, are not the people that should be... All they should do is just not stand in our way of finding accurate information, and instead they muddy the waters and they poison the well. So they not only stop us from accessing information, but they disinform us. That's the counterintelligence aspect. And so we say to them, have you forgotten all the previous commissions that you've had, all the other hearings that you've had, all the other previously military and civilian studies of these phenomena, and the conclusions you came to? Let's have a look at that. We'll do NICAP with Kehoe and RO, I suppose, with that was Townsend Brown, I guess. So he was one of the big people there. Let's start with Kehoe. Okay, so now Major General Kehoe. Bit of a weird name, isn't it? So now we are going to be talking about, we're going to cast our minds back just to really hammer this point home and kick off story time 8 with you guys here. The big thing is we see people like Major General Kehoe, who basically involves himself with a private group of individuals to try and research this phenomena. Now, this is now in the late 40s, early 50s, and it obviously continues a little bit further on. But Kehoe was part of the... so firstly, he was a pilot, and most people know him for his UFO research, but this man was very much involved in the American military and the United States Air Force. In fact, he worked under Lindenberg, who, let me cast your memory back, is the first person to make the transatlantic flight in one go. It took him 30 hours in a single engine biplane. And Lindenberg did that historic journey with Donald Kehoe not far underneath his wing. Now, Kehoe then involves himself, as I say, with the United States Air Force. And he then, let's actually pull this up, shall we? Let me put this on screen for you guys. There we go. All right. So, this is Major General Kehoe. Let's get a photo of him, shall we? Get his picture in our mind. Okay. So there he is. Okay. And here he is reading the book that he released, the Flying Saucers and all these other things. I think it always talks about basically the crash in Roswell. and also sightings and witnesses and evidence being brought forward. And now the interesting thing here is that this group of people he involves himself with here is the NICAP. I don't know how you would pronounce this, NICAP, and the NICAP. So NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and its counterpart, but not like in a negative way. They were also trying to do this. Another group of people. They were doing ARO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. These are both groups of people that already in the 50s are bringing together really well-known and established people with good reputations and good sense of science. That was the big thing. They were really bringing experts in the field, people that have not only seen these things but worked on these projects, and unfortunately, eventually we see the counterintelligence aspect of this whole thing catches up to it, in a sense, and very sadly, it gets infiltrated. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So General Kehoe, let's read here. So he says, Wikipedia says. That NICAP was Kehoe was one of several prominent professional military or scientific figures on the board of directors, lent to the group's degree of legitimacy, so we just mentioned that. And he published a newsletter, so NICAP published a newsletter, UFO Investigator, where he contributed to this. And this NICAP was also founded by Townsend Brown. So if you don't remember, Townsend Brown, this gentleman is responsible for a whole bunch of crazy things, and you'll find him, if you follow that rabbit hole, you'll eventually end up in the Bermuda Triangle, because he's there with submarines busy doing undersea secret technology to try and locate adversarial submarines. This is just off the heels of World War II. So back to Major General Kehoe. He gave many interviews where basically, he was being quite open with his investigations. This eventually led to this a lot of dispute, let's say, and eventually the official people got involved. So that was some universities, some Congress people, some other academic, government cutouts. They all got together and did this thing called the Condon Committee, if you pronounce it a little bit differently. And this was done primarily through the University of Colorado. So it was supposed to be all above board, but it was marred in controversy right from the get-go and right throughout. In fact, I had to do another one following up on this. Now, I encourage you to I really encourage you to have a look at this debacle that basically unfolded, because from the Condon Committee, as I say, they tried to again do bad science and not take the whole bulk of. And remember that neither NICAP nor ARO was even considering people that had abductions, or they were looking at just phenomena in the sky. They weren't even looking at cattle mutilations or anything like that at the time. So this was like pure science. There was credibility. And they came to some interesting conclusions, which were corroborated also in the MJ12 documents that we came across. We'll look at that finally in just a moment. But the whole point of the matter is, this is 1950-something, And here we are in 2023, and we are still trying to answer these same questions. Not you and I, luckily. This is why you have story time and other people in the UFO field, let's call it. Not that I'm part of the UFO field at all. I'm just some dude on the internet. But the point of the matter is, we have, as the public, been aware of these things for much, much longer. You can see that NICAP and ARO were immediately infiltrated, and the quality of the information, although it had a larger stamp of authority on it, became more muddy, became more marred in just bad faith acting, let's call it that. Bad faith acting, let's call it that. And you'll see a lot of that even today. It's almost like the problem hasn't resolved itself, right? And that's another theme that we sometimes touch on with story time. So this is the, for example, Major General Kehoe, who was quite a good example of our earlier attempts to try and understand these phenomena. And just before we go forward, because again, we call bullcrap on all this other stuff that they're doing today, showing us these like 9-second videos and now it's electro-optical. We captured it with electro-optical devices instead of just some blurry FLIR radar, radio telemetry or something. But it's just not going to cut it, at least for me. So I'll show you why. And here we have, for example, another Project Blue Book. This is also from the Library of Congress, and it's in their this has been received through Freedom of Information. But have a look at Library of Congress, blah blah blah. Where is it? Let me blow that up for you guys. Okay. So, description of various UFOs, trends, historical sightings, identification, Air Force special projects, because obviously now they're like, well, maybe we're confusing it for some really cool information that we as the Americans have. But, is it Russian? Or, at the time it was Soviet, right? And, they ifed and ahhed and ummed about this, and they actually came to some interesting conclusions here. And they also had a section on public reaction to UFOs. So this is early days, early days. And I want to just try get here we go. Published findings of the study, both by the Air Force and independent consultants, contain 5 major points. Okay, so let's go through them together. So number 1, and I want to stress this. I want to stress this point, this one right here. Let me highlight it in some funky color. Let's make it green. This one. UFOs do not pose a threat to the nation. Okay. Now, this is a little bit debatable because, there's as I said, I've been trained in military, in politics, which involves sort of like military understanding and strategy. So even if you are a peaceful nation, you need to be able to defend yourself against anyone that threatens that peace. Now, how you organize your politics around that is your own business. You can be like Sparta and just, call up all the farmers at once and then, go fight, or you can have a standing army or conscript. There's different ways. There are different ways you can go about that. By the way, this is the key theme that I also pointed out in Storytime 7, that people like Lou Elizondo and these CIA military intelligence cutouts that we get today, they are pushing us to view these things as a threat. So although we should be capable of defending ourselves against, a possible outside force, I think that should be a joint effort by all of humanity, and at the same time, our understanding of that possibility should not be pushed aside. If you're thinking about exopolitics, the relationship between humans and some other intelligent form, we're inventing AI now. That's exopolitics. That's an interesting direction that we're headed. Now, I want to go back to this main point here. UFOs do not pose a threat to the nation. Whilst we do need to be capable, this is an interesting point because right now, these Senate committees are basically making out that these, let's call them phenomena. These phenomena are, they're not heeding to our command, so they must be a threat because we find them over nuclear facilities. We find them when we're doing jet exercises in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, if you ask General Freya. You know, there's something interesting about this. Anyways, let's move forward. We'll come back to this point many times in the course of story time. So number 2, UFOs do not pose a present, do not represent developments or principles beyond present-day scientific knowledge. So, do not represent developments beyond present-day scientific knowledge. Okay, which means that they already have something of the kind. They understand something about how this phenomena is being or doing its thing. Next point, there is no evidence of extraterrestrial vehicles under the control of an intelligent being. Now that is an interesting point, because this is disputed. Some people say, oh well, there have been EBEs, and we'll look, I suppose the highest ranking person that you would find would be someone like Colonel Philip J. Corso. We'll look at his testimony later. He was fortunately alive long and wrote many books and gave many interviews, and so you can still find his talking about finding EBEs, which are extraterrestrial biological entities, basically alien bodies, right? So this is a disputed point, but it's interesting nonetheless that at this point, 1947, they're saying, look, there are things coming in and out of our atmosphere or appearing in our skies that we have no idea what these things are doing, what they want, and at this time we don't even know if there's anything in it. And this is quite believable in a sense, because even today, on the record, you'll have people in the military telling you and talking to you about telling you about motherships, and that these things could be drones. Or Muamua by Aviary Group. He is also intelligence cut out, but at least pretending to be a scientist at MIT doing UFO studies for the public. Although he's read into things, I'm almost sure of it. And again, one of the people professing to give us disclosure, to be like, I know what's going on, and these government people tell me the truth, and so, you know, I know what to study. And put a giant dish on the MIT roof, you know, and I'm like, haven't we had SETI for like a gazillion years? Not a gazillion, but you know what I'm saying. It's strange that only they know how to do things properly. And if you look at the laws, I just want to mention this final point. The laws are beginning to move in a way that stop a normal person like you and I from doing this kind of research, because we are not part of these transparency organs that they put before us, but they're in control of that. So why would we want to be a part of that apparatus that is just a very powerful counterintelligence machine? Enough said, let's move forward. So, number 4, there is no evidence of physical matter left behind by reported UFO. Now, 1947, this point here that they're making is basically talking about Roswell. Both these points, 3 and 4, are like, look, this Roswell thing, we don't know about it. Okay, it's like this, it's like that, but at the end of the day, what do we know? And if you remember that we only really get interested in Roswell when we start to get leaked documents in the 50s, and then again in the 80s when the Majestic documents come out, and a lot more information comes out. There's even manuals. Oh, we should totally look at that next. I wonder if I'll find that. Oh yeah, that's gonna be. It's like a CIA record, so it's got like a weird number. I didn't label it properly. I knew that I would pay. I'd pay a price for this. I'll see if I can find it in the meantime. But that was really interesting, because even if it's fake, it's exactly what you would want to do if you were dealing with extraterrestrial recovery. It's not put in any kind of fluffy language. It's straight up military speak, and it's to the point. It's how you would wish your military would act if this was a thing, you know. Anyways, let's move forward. I'll see if I can find that in just a moment. This one. Did I just fall into the right one at the right time? Maybe. So it's my eyes going so fast. No, I don't think this is the correct one. This talks about the extraterrestrial biological entities and stuff like that, but this, I don't have a good handle on it, so we'll leave this for another time. Okay, let's go back to this. We'll come back to the Majestic 12 Alien Manual in just a bit. So number 5, the last one. Number 4, sorry, let me just finish this one. He says, or they say in the report, no evidence of physical matter left behind, so no crashed pieces. Now, we know this is not true, because even today, in 2023, we have senators like Harry Reid saying on the record many times that he's been told the entire time that Lockheed Martin has pieces, for example, and he's been trying to get his clearance to get him some kind of briefing on it, but they just won't budge, and they can just confirm that they can't confirm, and so that's just a nudge to say you don't have a need to know. But even he can't help us, even though he gave us really interesting disclosure on the part of the Bigelow Aerospace contract. That was super interesting. But moving forward, so they're saying no physical matter left behind by a reported UFO. We know this is now a little bit more contentious because through cattle mutilation findings, that one I do have readily on hand. So this was released by the CIA as well. Also, some of this was put into Project Blue Book, and a journalist at the time, Howe, I don't know how you would pronounce it, Howe. She stumbles across these things, these mutilations, and starts herself with basically, it would be William Moore and officer. There was an officer on the scene at the time. His name's not coming to me at the moment. But these 3 people begin to interview and get experts in and create a really detailed file about cattle mutilations. And so this also opens up and peels back a little bit of the UFO thing. And I mention this because these reports also talk about debris that is left behind, scorch marks, radioactive areas that the ground grass doesn't grow back properly, or carcasses that even scavengers don't touch and don't decay as quickly. You know, there's very interesting facts there. So as I say, this in 1940, 1950 is now very much on the cards to investigate. And lastly, some small fraction of total sightings remain unidentified. Okay, I love this one. Let me just put a smiley face and say lol. Okay, because in 2023, this is what the Senate committee this is what the Senate subcommittee meeting with Dr. Kirkpatrick were told. He was just like, well, yes, no, they're incredible. They're strange. We don't know what they are. 1 to 10% from the literature I've read is basically that they are really, really difficult to explain. And if you guys follow Daniel Lists from The Dark Journalist, I highly recommend you do. They are the experts. I'm just but an enjoyer of their really good research. And Daniel List is a reporter and a journalist on this matter, and he came up with a really good word. The word is apotheum, and he's mentioned this a couple of times on his show. Now, apotheum is a word he's made up, and I encourage you to check where that story all came from. It's very interesting. But it means basically things that defy even the furthest stretch of our imagination regarding like physical reality. Because sometimes when we're talking about this 1 to 10% of cases, we're talking about sometimes time standing still, things going through walls, people experiencing an entire almost psychedelic experience, and many other almost indescribable experiences of going to other places and being in other worlds. It's really strange. And not only that, the craft themselves, we know now through these modern studies that we had difficulty picking them up because some of them phase. They're not perfectly solid. Very few of these cases, they're not just shiny orbs or like physical looking machines. Let's say machines, but they appear to be more like an energy, something. Who knows? So there is a small percentage of these cases that already in 1947 they were saying, that part there is really weird. Like that, we have no idea what the hell we're dealing with. But they haven't done anything to us. And, again, if you go back to Ezekiel and the wheel or the Vimanas, these things have been with us for thousands and thousands of years. So that's why their first thing was UFOs do not pose a threat to the nation. They're basically like, they're watching us. It's scoutcraft. And we haven't got any pieces and nothing downed in 1940, whatever the case was. I think there's the earliest account that I remember was 1941, and that was a different place, not at Roswell or thereabouts, Roswell or that Nevada region. But anyways, so as I said, this is like 1947, 1950 something. And already we asking questions, the same questions again in 2023. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, just again, welcome to Storytime 8. We are looking here at the great lengths that this counterintelligence military, we called it what, MilGov++. We're very inclusive on this show. MilGov++, which is like your military, industrial, intelligence, tech, government. I don't know. It's like you just put them all together, and that's the MilGov++. But in 2023, they're the ones now supposed to give us truth, and we're still asking them the same questions, and they're still giving us crappy answers, and just calling a sham to the whole thing. And we see the counterintelligence diverting us from the truth the whole time. And we looked at Paul Benovitz, whose life was was pretty much destroyed by the counterintelligence of the NSA, CIA, Department of National Intelligence. So, it's a tricky thing. This point that we are kicking off with in Storytime 8 is really important to keep in our minds. That's why the great build-up in looking at these documents. Just putting it under the microscope. So, doing a bit of due diligence, as it were. Now, when we looked at counterintelligence, in other words, the people designed to lie to us, in the previous episode we mentioned the Aviary Group and how, William Moore, who was part of the UFO community, also deceived them. And we looked at the MUFON 1989 paper that he read to the public, where he basically said, I was involved with Benovitz's misinformation, and it's his fault. It's everyone here's fault that you guys are not doing good science, and I'm doing what I need to do to get the truth. And me and a group of special people, where are we hearing this? Group of special people, we know the truth, and we'll find it, and we'll give you the truth. You'll know what's happening because, even if we deceive you, we're doing the real science. And, he was almost physically taken off stage, let's just say. So this is where we're kicking off Storytime 8. We're going to start with the Aviary Group. And because Bill Moore said he was part of this group of people with certain clearances that knew certain people, whatnot. And he himself put him put his whole persona on this pedestal of I know better than everyone else, you know. And instead, we find out that this Aviary Group was pretty much a disinformation campaign because it was by and co-opted by many people involved in defense intelligence. So I'm not going to hang too much on it. A really good article you'll find is in Bibliotheca Ep.8, I think is how you pronounce it. Here we go. Let's put it up on the screen for you. But I just want to make this point. Really, this is the reason I want to just bring this up quickly. Is that this is a group that are designed and trained to not only know a secret, but to disinform and twist. They call it non-physical warfare. So it's basically information warfare. In modern age, we call it fifth generational warfare. And these psyop type things are considered non-lethal because, not like going up and hitting anyone or shooting anyone, but you're doing things that do incapacitate humans or at least control them in some way. And this Aviary Group here, I just wanted to point them out because each one of them, Moore eventually told us, and we then discovered, had a secret name of a bird, a pseudonym, as it were. And you can read all about them here, but you can see here that Christopher Green from the CIA, he was Blue Jay. Harold Puthoff, ex-NSA, and Harold Puthoff is very well known in the, not only in the UFO subject, but in parapsychology. I mean, this guy and Tog basically kick off the Stargate project, which we find out later is, all these kinds of things, technical remote viewing, men who stare at goats, Montauk project, all kinds of deep and secret mind control business. Okay, so that's who we the group of people here. Then there's Dr. Jack Verona, the Department of Intelligence. He was part of the Sleeping Beauty project, for those who want to look that up, using battle superiority, mind-altering electromagnetic weaponry. Love that one. So it seems that we've gotten bored of those. Now we're doing like warp and dark energy, 0-point energy systems and all kinds of stuff. Apparently, that's what Bigelow Aerospace is currently contracted for, and those kinds of things. But no, back in the day, this is what we were doing: electromagnetic weaponry for mind-altering mind control. And John Alexander was Penguin, and John Pandolfi was Pelican. And I believe that good old William Moore was Sparrow, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look that one up. Yeah, so you see then that there are whole groups designed around this whole secrecy project, and it's specifically designed to keep us away from the truth. It's super important to keep this in mind, because again, when you see the governments asking the same questions from the 1940s and 1950s, something's wrong. You know that we've gone a little bit off course there. So that is the Aviary Group, and I point this out. And earlier we were talking about the NICAP and ARO, which were publicly funded private investigations looking at these things, and they came to similar conclusions. And again, I'm just trying to hammer this point home, that we are not only asking this for the first time, but it's almost like we've forgotten because there is this counterintelligence force that discredits and muddies the waters and diverts our attention away from anything that moves towards the truth. And remember, Benevitz, there's the reason I bring him up, is because you say, okay, well, we're civilians, we're not supposed to know these secrets. But Benevitz was one of the Kirkland Air Force Base contractors. He was so renowned, not, I wouldn't say renowned is maybe not the right word. He was so respected that when he brought forward his evidence, it went straight up the chain. You know, it's not like some dude who just knocked at the gate and they were like, thank you, get lost. He was contracted to them. He had special clearance. He built his, not built, he bought his house right on the perimeter of Kirkland Air Force Base, which I remind you is a goodness gracious, it's a site of many sightings. It's a Air Force base that has had many and even declassified official incidences. So Kirkland, you know, as much as we say, oh, Benevitz was picking up like NSA messing with him signals, maybe not. He was detecting these things and photographing stuff long before he presented it to his higher-ups, and he did that in good faith, and they destroyed him. So even a person that is read in and part of the military enterprise, they basically used him as a way to discover how a foreign agent would possibly infiltrate them. And so very sad, but it's important to keep this in mind. Okay. Now, oh, one interesting thing. I see Strawberry ZA has followed us. You can see his name up there. If you follow us, please hit the subscribe button. We'll be putting this up on YouTube. You can follow us on our Discord. If you want to send us an email, as you know, Storytime is part of the primematterpodcast at gmail.com. So do send us whatever questions and information, whatever you want over there. Obviously, no spam in that. Keep it cordial. Keep your cool and your reason. That's the thing we need today. And I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. So we're going to go forward now in just about another, just under an hour, let's say 45 minutes. You're welcome to put your questions in chat and all these things. And I was saying that Strawberry ZA is someone I know, and welcome to the show, made some really interesting, I suppose, has often told me some really interesting things about Carl Jung. And earlier we were talking about Major General Kehoe. And did you know that because Kehoe was quite a prolific author and was attending symposiums and all these kinds of things, Jung actually wrote a letter to him. It's actually studied. That is Jung's interest in the UFO phenomena. Let's see if I can quickly pull that up. I'm sure I can. Jung's letter to Kehoe. Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull this from the one I have under hand is, here we go. Oh yeah, this is going to be beautiful. So I'm also a big fan of Carl Jung, who you know is a psychologist, one of the founders with Sigmund Freud of what we call today the field of psychology. So a person who definitely tried to understand the mind, but he came sort of undone from that, being the father of psychology, because he had very alternative views, UFOs being one of them, archetypal, universal consciousness, very interesting, almost esoteric Eastern ideas, which were very contrary to the Western ideas of Freud, which was very medical and very sort of Newtonian, step by step, one thing infects another thing, infects another. And anyways, Jung was a lot more open-minded to things. And so that's why you find that although he has such a high reputation for his contribution to psychology, we still see Freud as the father of it, let's say. But let's move away from that and straight into, I just want to make this point here. Okay, I'm going to read from this Journal of Scholarly Studies, Jungian Scholarly Studies, volume 17 from 2022. So again, people are studying this up to this day. And this is super interesting because you're finding this being looked at very closely, telling you that there's something interesting here. So forgive me, it's going to be a bit of an extended quote, but you might find it very interesting to know. So Young's references fortunately provide a suitable reminder of Kehoe's important disclosure work. The continued delay in official government disclosure, however, remains problematic because the clean energy systems reverse engineered from captured extraterrestrial craft remains classified. Kehoe was aware of this link between UFOs, anti-gravity propulsion, and the future of energy production on Earth. So now, that's not my exact view. I haven't got a lot to go on that. That's all inside the Flying Saucer Conspiracy by Kehoe and Lear. Flying Saucer Conspiracies by Lear, but Kehoe had also his range of books. I don't have policy documents for those, but I mean, you can believe it if you look at the UAP contracts that we got from Senator Harry Reid in the last batch of disclosures for the last Senate hearings. Let me just go forward with this very quickly. He says, quoting William P. Lear, the founder of the Learjet Corporation, as stating, "Unlimited power, freedom from gravitational attraction, and infinitely short travel are now becoming feasible." In fact, according to Lear, in Kehoe's paraphrasing, an American aviation company was already conducting gravitational field research. Kehoe published Lear's claims more than 6 decades ago, yet the military-industrial complex that Kehoe fought to expose and that President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about, and that was in his famous address, final address as president to his people, he warned us about and retains this the power that retains a stranglehold on the UFO issue and related technologies. In a famous statement that points out the shadow hanging over the system that limits justice and liberty, Eisenhower states, "In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex." So, Sulla goes on to say, in Sulla's interpretation, that is, he says, Eisenhower's speech was a veiled warning about the sinister influence that the Fourth Reich had achieved through its influence in the US military complex and the danger this posed to American liberties and the incoming Kennedy administration. Now, you might be saying, wait, I'm sure there was only 3 of those Reichs. Where's the 4th one? And the 4th one is when we looked at story time number 2, which was Operation High Jump, where basically we went to great lengths to point out how the advanced technology of the Bell experiments in Germany and other plasma and electrogravitic experiments and rocket experiments and rocket technology were snatched up by the Allies and the Soviets through Operation Paperclip, many of them fleeing to Argentina, many of them being absorbed to the United States and being put into NASA's program. So imagine, these people are escaping Nuremberg trials because of their advanced knowledge in this technology. Werner von Braun, Dornberger, all of these people were straight up out of, Adolf's, elite. But they escaped Nuremberg. Some of them escape to Argentina. Some of them get absorbed by the superpowers. But there's claims that some of them ended up in New Schwabenland, in Antarctica. And that's why when Operation High Jump goes there, they don't just they say they're going for a scientific expedition, but they take military equipment. They're taking, like, troops and aircraft and like, I want to say tanks, but I think that's incorrect. There was other mechanized stuff that they took there, and twice they went and twice they came back with many things missing, saying it was just the weather. But who knows? There's lots of studies going into that and the advanced technologies that the Germans gave to the superpowers, specifically America, which then became NASA and the Apollo programs and all these things. But listen, we're getting off the beaten track, but this is just a very interesting point made by Salah and the quote from Lear. You can see that these are not just people on the side. I mean, these are people that have actually worked and studied these kinds of events. But all of this was to actually, for good old Strawberry, I wanted to bring this up here. Here we go. This is Young's, it's a transcript of Young's letter. It's very short, so that's why, I didn't want to start with it right off the bat. But he says, "Dear Major Kehoe, I'm grateful for all the courageous things you have done in elucidating the thorny problem of the UFO reality. If it is all true that the American Air Force or the government withholds telling facts, then one can only say this. One can only say that this is the most psychological and stupid policy one could invent. This is the most unpsychological and stupid policy that one can invent. Nothing helps the rumor and panics more than ignorance. It is self-evident that the public ought to be told the truth. I remain, your dear Major, yours, Carl Young." So you can see that even then, even people in the birth of the psychological field say, in a way, the public is ready. We've had religion with us for a long time. We've had belief systems with us for a long time. It's not uncommon to think of something greater than ourselves that comes from the stars. That's almost the origin story of nearly every single ancient and some current belief systems we have today. So I think that's all very, very interesting. Now, we were talking about here Major Kehoe and in NICAP and the counterintelligence that eventually destroyed it, and through examples like people in the Aviary Group and whatnot, and how this is like how the government has bamboozled us, that they still forcing Congress to ask them the same questions they did from 60, 70 years ago. So the thing I want to get to next, and to really hammer this point home, because I think one of the most important documents that we have, that really, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but this was, I'm going to show you how early. All right, this is September 23rd, 1947. Let's have a look. So this here is the Twining report, the Twining memo, sorry. Now, we're talking about disclosure here, and at least what is on public record. Now here we can see, I'm not going to get too deep into this, there's quite a lot, so just to go through it nice and quick. This is basically the head of material intelligence for the Air Force, being written to by the Marine side. In other words, the infantry side is writing to the Air Force, and they are saying, considering the opinion of this command concerning so-called flying objects. So this is them replying, and they say, regarding so-called flying discs, it is the opinion based on this interrogation report data furnished by blah 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 and preliminary studies of T2 and Aircraft Laboratory Engineering Division T3. Those are clearance levels. This opinion was arrived at in the conference between the personnel from the Air Institute of Technology, Intelligence Level T2, Office Chief of Engineering Division, and the Aircraft Power Plant and Propeller Laboratories of Engineering Division T3. And that is that. The phenomena reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. B, there are objects probably approximate the shape of a disc, or such appreciable size as to appear as large as a man-sized aircraft. So these things are not always small, Then it says here, there is a possibility that some of these incidents may be caused by natural phenomena such as meteors, fair enough, The reported operating characteristics, such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, and the action must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lends one to believe in the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. Now, Freya, from the Tic Tac incident, let me pull that up for us here. He said the same thing, okay? He said that when he encountered these craft, they not only seem to be aware of I'm spelling this incorrectly. So he said that not only did it seem to understand his position and sort of move with the flight group, but once it eventually disappeared, it showed up at his I forget the Air Force term for their designated final destination, which is secret to the almost very last moment. So not even the pilots know, and yet the Tic Tac showed up at their like DMZ, let's call it. And Freya's gone on Joe Rogan and on Commander Freya's I think also been on Lex Friedman. I want to just see if I can get a picture of him. There we go. So this is ABC News reporting. Commander David Fravor. My apologies. That's how you spell it. Fravor. David Fravor. So this is the Tic Tac that basically he was chasing and ended up almost like playing a game with them. Like, oh, you chase me, now I'm going to disappear, and now I'll play a little trick on you. I'll show up where you don't even know you're supposed to be, and Command hasn't yet even told you. So like this Twining memo says, lends to the belief that the possibility that some of these objects are controlled because they are considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft. So as I said, 1947, 2020, or I think Fravor was in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Very interesting, isn't that? And basically, opinion concerning flying discs, absence of the trail, circular or elliptical, several reports, well kept of information flights, no associated sound. Again, they mentioned this again in the last UAP reports. Leveled flight speeds normally above 300 knots. Okay, so it is recommended that, I'm just going to read the final section, that the Army Air Force issues a directive issuing a priority and a security classification and a code name for a detailed study of this matter to include the preparation of a complete set of all available and pertinent data. I'm not going to read more. Obviously, they say that, keep close to this group, people like the Jet Propulsion Laboratories, RAND. The RAND Corporation is a think tank. They want the Air Force Scientific Advisory Group, and they want the Atomic Energy Commission. Army and Navy also involved in this information sharing, and that's what we discovered in story time 6 and 7, that we had Project Grudge. So going backwards, it's Blue Book, Grudge, and Sign, and that becomes official, and they hid that from us, and only through freedom of information, with them giving us crumbs, we eventually start putting all these pieces together. Slowly. Slowly but surely. So, again, it's very interesting where we find ourselves. It really is. When it comes to the topic of disclosure, we see the force of counterintelligence, and what is doing that counterintelligence is never clear. Sometimes it's the intelligence services, sometimes it's the military, sometimes it's the aerospace people themselves, because as we see, private contracting is now a part of the military. So that was the Twining document, and I want to look at Yeah, we got a few more minutes. I want to look at maybe let's look at two more people. Well, let's see how far we get. The next person I want to have a look at is Colonel Philip J. Corso. Now, this is a person that held an incredibly high rank in the military and has been also incredibly vocal about just everything UFO related. So not only that he himself has seen an EBE, in other words, an extraterrestrial being, but he's also come on the record and said that he was working for not only advanced aerospace, but he was part of the nuclear program in Germany. So this is a man not to be trifled with. And as I said, very luckily, he has been around with us for a good amount of time. The good old bean. So let me see if I have anything here on him. Otherwise, we'll just call him up straight. And as always, we do it live. We'll do it together. Why not? Let's call him up. So, Philip J. Corso, and let's put that up on the screen for you guys. So, American officer, and again, I love going to Wikipedia because they are like the milk toast version of like official information. That's like, oh, you don't want to rock the boat. So this is what most people would agree on. And as we know, most people aren't very informed on these matters. So let's have a look at Philip J. Corso from Wikipedia. Now, as you can see, he lived a long life. He apparently died in 1998. My apologies. But as I said, he was with us for quite a long time, that he gave many interviews and such, and wrote many books. And his most famous, The Day After Roswell, talks about his experience. Now, this is obviously when he's now retired from his military intelligence life. Now, this is a dude who's met popes, has fought the Nazis, has made rat lines, trying to get people, trying to make people escape. He was in the Korean conflicts. What else did I miss here? Yeah, and you can read about him, but we're interested in the part of The Day After Roswell, is where he writes, and here's a name that is top of the list of the MJ12 documents. Hillenkutter. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but Roscoe H. Hillenkutter. He's the one of the highest ranking people at the time, and created a lot of the intelligence apparatus that was supposed to serve the president on these matters. And by the way, as I said, in the Twining memo, they say that there should be a code name associated with these things. And, although Project Blue Book and Grudge and Sign, and we see many others that followed afterwards, they all seem to fall under this MJ12 thing, which is, seems to recenter itself, and we keep getting a lot of this information. And just, as I said, Major General Corso, it was basically the second highest ranked in the military at the time, at least in his branch of it. And according to him, they reverse engineering artifacts that led to the development of particle beams, fiber optics, lasers, integrated circuits, Kevlar, all kinds of things. And he mentions, and this is interesting, this is the first time it really goes on the record, the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, was meant to achieve the destructive capability of electronic guidance systems for incoming warheads, as well as those of and enemy craft, as well as those of extraterrestrial origin. And that's really interesting, because every time we sign, not we, but every time the American military gets Congress to sign off their strategic defense, that means they get funding to continue these kinds of things. And also want to draw your attention to the fact that Tesla was asked Tesla offered not only to the Tsar at the time, and to the king in Great Britain, and to the Americans, a death ray. Basically, what he was building in Warden Tower in Colorado Springs could be not only used for many different functions like HARP can, but one of the things that it could do was shoot things at an incredible distance. And this is where Storytime 5 came in with our discussion about how Vannevar Bush and Trump's uncle were the ones to go and confiscate Tesla's documents about this kind of technology upon his death in New York. And so they had this technology taken and straight into the military complex because it was a weapon that could be used to shoot things down at high speeds at great distances. And so Philip Corso kind of corroborates that story again. And, you know, although I encourage you to have a look at, let's see if we have any of his videos. Oh, actually, wait, I think I have something. Yeah, I think I might. It's not the greatest, it's not the greatest quality, but it'll give us a little look. Little look into that. Okay, cool. Let's fire this up. And then let me just also make sure that it's going to come through on your end. You see that? Excellent.
Corso's story begins just days after the alleged crash. July 1947, then Major Corso was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas. He saw, he says, an extraordinary shipment headed for Washington from Roswell, which he described for us when we visited the Roswell UFO Museum and Research Center.
They were not caskets, but they were boxes, say they were about 6 feet long, about 3 or 4 feet wide, and they were covered with tarps. So when I went in with a sergeant, and he picked up one corner of the tarp, and there's this body floating in some sort of liquid.
A body?
Yeah, a body. A complete body, not the head only. Complete body.
What kind of a body?
It was like that thing there.
You're serious?
Yeah.
So that's Corso in his own words, basically saying that you know, he doesn't know what happened to them. He wasn't involved in that project, but he's seen EBEs. And so again, not a person to be trifled with. This is a person that had atomic weapons under his control, vetted by the highest levels of American secrecy. And we know through MJ12 and Saarbacher, do I have? Yeah, of course I've got Saarbacher's stuff. Who wouldn't? A respectable person wouldn't keep something from Dr. Saarbacher. Now, let's pull this up. This is Saarbacher replying to someone who wrote him a letter, and this is what puts Vannevar Bush on the map, let's say, regarding the UFO file, and so a couple other people. But he says here, relating to my own experience, so this is, you know, he was asked some questions, and this is Dr. Saarbacher, who is also an incredibly talented physicist. And remember when we tried to Wikipedia him live here on the show, you could see that you had to go like 3 or 4 websites down, and the first website referred to him being a bit of a UFO conspiracy theorist. And this man has patents. This man has got clearance. This man was part of some of the most important scientific work that America was doing at the time. So, you know, on the surface of the internet, he may seem like a bit of a kook, but if you go look in academic journals and in patents, you will see that this is no slouch. And he even wrote, relating to my own experience regarding recovered flying saucers, I have no association with any of the people involved or knowledge regarding the dates or recoveries. If I had, I would send it to you. I can only tell you this: von Neumann was definitely involved. Von Neumann, you know, was the we were talking about Antarctica, the Nazis, the Bell projects, Paperclip, and the NASA program. That's when von Neumann has a part to play there. And Dr. Vannevar Bush was definitely involved, and I think Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. Now, these people were all also part of the Manhattan Project, and in this document, Saarbacher says that this UFO thing is even higher. It's a higher secrecy rating than even the H-bomb. Okay, so sorry, I mistook von Neumann for Dr. von Braun, but von Neumann also has links going that far back, but he was doing more the science side of things, where von Braun was doing more the rocket side of things for NASA. My apologies. Anyways, so he says, regarding verification that persons you listed were involved, so he says, my association with the Research and Development Board under the Dr. Compton, that's where the Compton report comes in, during the Eisenhower administration was rather limited. So that although I had been invited to participate in several discussions associated with the reported recoveries, I could not personally attend the meetings. I'm sure that they would have asked Dr. von Braun. But he goes here, I did receive official reports in my office at the Pentagon. All of these were left there at the time. I do not recall receiving any photographs. I have to make the same reply as number 4. He says, I recall the interview with Dr. Brenner and of the Canadian Embassy, and we'll get to Paul Hellyer next. He'll be the last one we'll look at. And Paul Hellyer was the Defense Minister for Canada, and he's also part of this group of really high-ranking military officials that have been very clear about, what's going on the file here. Now, he goes on basically to say here, let's have a quick look. There were reports that instruments or people operating these machines were also very lightweight, sufficient to withstand the tremendous deceleration and acceleration associated with their machinery. Now, he says that these aliens were constructed like certain insects that we have observed on Earth, wherein because of the low mass and inertial forces involved, they could operate these instruments. I still don't know why the high order of classification has been given and why the denial of the existence of these devices. I'm sorry it's taking me so long to reply. It occurs to me that Dr. Bush's name was incorrectly spelled. Now, I think I might be... Yeah, there we go. So Saar was the one that, throughout his years gives us really good... I mean, he's a physicist. He just tells the truth as the facts are in front of him. And we really have to thank him for that. And that's why I think he was so kind of just ignored for his comments about that sort of thing. But, this is another person that's aware of these phenomena and of the people involved in these things and how they are trying to essentially shoot these things down using things like Tesla technology and Van de Graaff technology and things like that. So we said we're going to look at Paul Hellyer next. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. It's like Hellyer. Paul Hellyer. It's a weird name. But I mean, the first time I saw him was on an RT a report where he was basically, saying that he was involved with aliens, and then this is now because disclosure is apparently coming out as political pressure gets put on, and people are able to, politicians are able to use it in their campaigning, like Trump did, and probably others will in the future. He's talking very openly about the UFO file and America's involvement in it, and let's have a look at some of these. Let's pull this up on screen for you guys. So, Paul Hellyer, longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. He was an engineer, politician, writer, and commentator. Oh, it doesn't actually mention, of course it must. Minister of National Defense. Yeah. Let's see. Cabinet Minister, Liberal Leadership, Politics, Canadian Action Party. Oh, and then it jumps just straight to extraterrestrial intelligence claims. I just want to see here. So, as Minister of Defense, there we go, he oversaw the drastic and controversial integration and unification of the Royal Canadian Navy, Army, and Air Force into a single organization called the Canadian Forces. Now, this is interesting because Canada doesn't have a very big army, but it does have a very capable one. The interesting thing is that the Canadian Army is very much under the throes of, let's call it Northcom, North American protection from NORAD. And these recent balloons that have been shot down were, some of them were over Canada. We'll have a look at them just now. And interestingly enough, Trudeau will come on Twitter and say, "Oh, I shot those things down," but he didn't shoot anything down. The USA gave him authorization to basically say that, he's aware that they're going to do this. And, I don't even think that Biden gave that order, because it goes under NORAD, which falls under the continuation of government, General von Herk. That's where we're going to finish up this story time. But let's just finish quickly here with, good old Paul Theodore Hellier, former Minister of Defense of Canada. And as I said, if you check, he was even on the History Channel on Ancient Aliens doing his thing. Let's maybe see if we can get a quick chunk of this interview. Here we go.
What is going on, not only in our own world, us knowing.
Okay.
The future of the world depends on us knowing what is going on, not only in our own world, but in others that are monitoring us and attempting to influence us, for better or for worse. And there are people here who know a lot about that.
So, former Defense Minister of Canada, talking about how there is an intelligent presence. It's been here, it's involved with us. And, people like him bring up this term of exopolitics. Oh, how can we forget not Mr. That's an understatement. Chaim Escher is the Israeli former commander of their space and missile program. Chaim Escher. Now, this one was crazy. This dude basically said that not only are there aliens. Now, remember, Israel doesn't mess around. When it comes to military things, they are as sharp as any surgical tool you can think of, for good or for bad. And so for one of their highest ranking military officials to, in their retirement, come out and say, now I can openly speak. And when people interview him, he's not like senile, he's not crazy. He's not just a blabbering old man. This is a man who was entrusted with strategic defense of Israel and their secret missile and space program. So let's pull him up on the... let's pull him up, shall we? In fact, before we pull him up, let's first... So, Chaim Escher, let's just go straight from the... Let's go straight from the news reports. I think that's a good place to start. So the crazy thing is that this guy also starts to talk about... okay, here we're looking at the news reports. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let's have a quick peek. Yes, okay. So this is NBC. This is the Jerusalem Post, MSNBC, BBC, the Mirror. These are really big publications. So for example, if we take MSNBC, I think I saw that one. I think that one doesn't go through a paywall. Okay, let's take the BBC. I might go... So I just want to read you a little piece here. So it says, the unclassified report was demanded by Congress. That's the things we've been talking about later. And that's why the interest in the US at the moment. And that's why this guy coming out now and saying what he's saying, well, not right now, but like very recently, a year or two ago, it's really mind-blowing, And so there's... nothing there I needed to see. So let's take NBC News. Now, so two interesting things he added here was that America knows and has exopolitics. In other words, we have relations with these alien races. But he's also saying that Trump knows. So let's actually hear Trump here. If we can steal a little piece of this clip.
Aliens exist, and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said the aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are. NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
All right, so I'm just want to jump ahead here because I think there is a section where Trump speaks. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, how mind-blowing is that? Just fake or real? I mean, that's... you would think that Trump would come straight out and just say, "Oh no, what is this guy talking about?" And but you know, whether that helps his ego or his whether it helps his ego or whether it helps his campaigning or whether it might actually be part of the truth. You know, that's a very interesting question. So this is not playing as nicely as I'd like to, so let me just pull that up from an archive. Okay, and here we go. It's a little bit better. How's that? Now you can see here, this is where America created the Space Force, the 6th branch of the military forces. Excuse me. And we had a look at how that was such an important part of Trump's campaign and how that ties into this whole like UFO file. And we'll see how this also ties into continuation of government. But just moving forward here, I want to just get the part where Trump speaks, if there is. And obviously they even flash you one of the senators. Let's see what President of the United States here had to say.
This idea of making sure it was interesting that he...
Oh, it's a 3-part plan to fight COVID. That's why. A slightly longer report. Let's head back. So, there we go. It's let's hear what this guy.
And he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria.
So I'm going to leave it there. Basically, you know, this guy says that the Galactic Federation, this sounds like something straight out of Star Trek. The Galactic Federation asked Trump not to reveal this alien file. And, you know, whatever the secret is, aliens, not aliens, secret technology, not secret technology, whatever it is, it's so big that they're making psyops about it. There's so much going on here that we need to sort of discover. Now, that's kind of where I want to start to wrap up this episode here of Storytime 8. Because now that we have a much clearer mind about how governments say one thing and militaries say one thing and then completely do another, and they in this like shadowy octopus with tentacles everywhere, and it's difficult to follow what's going on. When the Pentagon loses trillions of dollars every year, they just plug the books and just keep moving forward. But that money is going to something and it's being used. It's not like it just falls off the back of a truck. You know, somebody's taking it, somebody's using it. And that's, you know, some of the things we need to be aware of. And to really put this all in a bow, I want to mention, again, Dr. Peter Dale Scott, who does a great job talking about... He's not the first to talk about the deep state, but he talks about deep events. Now, this is why we are so interested in things like the JFK assassination and 9/11 and many other things, because when you track carefully how in the 60s, well, you see, in the 40s and 50s, the UFO phenomena begins to accelerate because of our nuclear testing. And then you see that deep secrecy comes, even deeper secrecy comes into the military complex and buries it even deeper and keeps it even further away from executive power, that's elected officials through the president and Congress. And what happens there is that the secret is so fiercely protected by people that are, by their very nature, let's just say, carefully trained to not only be counterintelligence, but to also be very effective at neutralizing any threats to these programs or people involved in them. So this kind of rogue breakaway part of the military that basically thinks it can do what it wants as long as it's not caught, and has become very good at hiding its crimes. This insidious thing, because it's not just military. Remember, Peter Dale Scott points out that at the very, very bottom are just regular individuals, and then crime syndicates, and then politicians through the revolving door of industry and government and military contracts, and then people above that and further and further. So it's not just one layer, it's dynamic. And this UFO file moves through the different parts of the government and the military industrial complex. And again, this is all about deep events, because once we see this heavy rogue information security complex kind of descend on the world and the United States in the 60s, we see brave presidents like Kennedy come forward and say, I don't agree with the Bay of Pigs, I don't agree with Operation Northwoods, I don't agree with anything that this CIA is doing illegally that I, as even president, cannot even rein in. And that was just the CIA. He also had, JFK also had problems with the Federal Reserve and other forms of secrecy. He was the one that said, we find the concept repugnant, in a free and fair and open society. Paraphrasing there a bit. So these deep events start to happen. The JFK assassinations, MLK, RFK, other political activists, our illegal entry into Vietnam, I say ours in the collective West, the Iran-Contra, the Watergate scandals, and really, again, the UFO files comes back into the Watergate side, because the lawyer for the Watergate burglars, Caddy, he went on the record to say that his clients, I'm forgetting the full story, please forgive me, but he was saying that Kennedy wanted to share information with the Russians, and 10 days later he was then assassinated, and he's got the receipts for that. So you see, again, Watergate is, again, the CIA and other intelligence and military things just trying to do whatever they can, even illegally, try and hide something there. And that's, again, where we start to see all these false flag operations and the PSYOPs running into the 80s, and Operation Artichoke, and they're really doing illegal things, snatching people off the street, and Operation Midnight Climax with, brothels implicating politicians and other people of industry for information. Like, these people are just unhinged. They're doing things that no law is supposed to allow. No matter how they tell you national security comes first and it's all above board. No, absolutely not. And people like Kennedy knew this. And so that's where you get deep events like his assassination. And we can see how the aerospace, the military, the secrecy, the government all have a part to play in these deep events. And as I say, these deep events like Watergate and the Iran-Contra show you, through what was discovered from the reports, that it's got intelligence all over it. And it's not just the intelligence services. I'm not saying, that everyone in the intelligence services or the intelligence service concept is itself bad. But you can just see that at this time in history, the whole world is suffering from this kind of thing. And I would go so far as to say that Peter Dale Scott does a great job of showing parallels between these deep events. And if you look at today, our bloodlust for a conflict with Russia, and I say our again in the collective West, demonizing and pushing Iran and North Korea and China, the propaganda is so strong and so there are no breaks, there are no off ramps for peace here. Trump came along and tried to do something in the Middle East, but since then it's been all gas, no brakes. We just want to send more money and more weapons and destroy Russia from the inside and balkanize it, which is, I mean, I understand you don't like the current administration and you might not like their politics. They're a world away from each other. And so this idea of global domination and the threat that Russia poses in their space and UFO programs is also really a big factor to take into all of this. But that's the concept of deep events. It's these secret things that, people are going around just doing what they do daily. Go to school, we go to work, we do what we do. We don't make airplanes fly into buildings and all kinds of crazy things like that. Who's got time for that? It's people that are involved in the military and the intelligence community and are doing false flag and counterintelligence operations to make a narrative be accepted by the public. That's called narrative control. To then go and do illegal things like wars. Iraq, Afghanistan, weapons of mass destruction, ring a bell? And that's nowhere close to the UFO file. But this is just an interesting example. So, what is going on here then? Why is government acting so high and mighty, like they control us and that they know better and that they have all these advanced technologies and can basically push us around and lie to us and treat us like children? Well, this is where we're going to wrap up Storytime 8, and it's going to make the springboard for the next episode. But really, this all boils down to continuation of government. Now, what is continuation of government? Basically, it is the doomsday project that most countries were formulating during the time of the Cold War. Because we have such incredible destructive power available to us, where we can destroy the entire planet several times over, it became evident that you could not destroy one nation entirely and so thoroughly that it could not respond in some way, either through a secret space satellite, or submarine-launched nuclear missiles, or even sleeper cells within countries. Mutually assured destruction was a super scary thing that was a check and balance at the time of tension between the superpowers of the Soviet Union and the US. And so these concepts were really very deeply considered by the military. And that is, what happens if and when, in their minds at the time, a nuclear war breaks out? How do we survive a decapitation strike on our capital and against our leaders? And the answer to this was using the deep security information services that they had and the military complex to basically begin building massive underground bunkers, retaliatory systems, and this continuation of government. Now, a continuation of government is so secret in the US that when it comes up in Congress, they say, look, if you want to make a special hearing, we can do that behind closed doors, but I can't talk any further about this to you. And this would be the military to the elected officials. And a few times, continuation of government has raised its ugly head. Although it comes as a way to try and help during times of emergency, this term emergency has been so greatly stretched these days that it even goes insofar as to include cyber attacks. Now, you might say, okay, but we need a coordinated response. And I'd say, yes, we probably do. But the coordinated response that the US has for itself at the moment comes through emergency powers that were given through the deep event of 9/11. It was only then that they started with Homeland Security and FEMA camps and continuation of government in earnest. Through the final nail in the coffin was Obama signing executive orders that, again, secret, but tied together the plan to basically, whenever NORAD decides, or Northcom decides, that there is when there is an emergency that might threaten the general population, they can kick in these things called Emergency Powers Act. And the presidential has these things called PEADs. These are presidential executive, what are they? Let's have a quick look. I don't want to butcher the acronym. But they are the orders that kick in when emergencies happen in the US. And they are secret, obviously, because no one's supposed to know who gets shuffled where and how the government will structure itself. But what's really alarming is that once a senator was asking, at the time, I believe it was General von Herk, who's the head of COG, he said, if we have an emergency and continuation of government powers kick in, does that not then suspend the Constitution, which is supposed to be the supreme law of the land? And he didn't receive an answer to that question. It got a bit of a word salad, and we can talk about this behind closed doors. But there wasn't a flat, actually, no, the supreme law of the land that everyone is following is the supreme law of the land. There seems to be, with continuation of government and this illegal military insidious deep force, let's call it, a belief that they are above laws, that they are above morals and our considerations for ourselves as people. And I think that the only way you get that kind of a egotistical view of the world is if you have technologies that others don't. You've become a breakaway society. You've got politicians today even that are on the record, like Trump's daughter's husband that went to go sign the Abraham Accords. Goodness, doesn't come to me now. What is his name? I'm gonna kick myself when I see this. Let's see, who did Trump send as his emissary? I am gonna kick myself, aren't I? Let's see. This was brokered by Jared Kushner. How could I forget? Yes, there we go. Trump senior advisor Jared Kushner. He went on record to say that he keeps his body healthy because according to him, breakthrough medical technologies are just around the corner. So he might be the last generation to either die or the last generation to be born. Think about that. That means that we are either going to be making babies or keeping humans alive indefinitely. We'll be like those cool jellyfish that just get old and then young and old and young and old and young, but they never really die. The telomeres on them. Anyways, we're getting a little bit off track here, but we're talking about the continuation of government and how there is with it. We've gone through like nearly 6 story times to try and actually more, 7. This is now the 8th, to try and just frame how does something like continuation of government come about, and why is it so super scary? The level of secrecy and illegality is next level, and who knows what these people have in terms of technology. And this is the threat. And many sci-fi writers have spoken about this idea, but basically it's that you have governments that are so parts of just society, because sometimes it's part of government, sometimes it's not. It's all very gaseous, but you have people that have access to technologies that put them orders of magnitude above humans. I mean, take a look at Ben Rich. Let's listen to some of Ben Rich's quotes. Let me just call him up here. Ben Rich. Yeah. So Ben Rich worked as head of Lockheed Martin's skunkwork divisions for many years, and he has been on the record saying some crazy things, and really to the point. He doesn't mince his words. So from here, shall I? Still have it open. So, at the UCLA, at a talk he was giving at the UCLA, he basically goes on the record and says, we have things that can basically, we can do anything. We can basically take ET home, is what he said. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And, he's come out and said other really, really eye-opening things. So I'm just going to leave this on screen for the moment while I'm just searching for the thing I want. And you might have seen him because he is the father of stealth, right? He's the father of the invisible planes. SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117, these all came out of the Skunk Works, the U-2. And let's not forget that Oswald was working in Naijang in Japan, where the U-2 was being secretly built. Everyone sort of forgets that. But, this is a man, again, that has some of the highest military clearances and has built some of the most advanced craft for the US. And he's going on about aliens left, right, and center. Not so much about aliens, but just how they have back-engineered that technology to basically do what they do. He says there's the stuff we build and then there's the stuff they build. Let's see if I can get those quotes for you. Let's see if they are readily available to me. Never a thing when you want it. So I'll keep having a look because his quotes were just really worth looking at. And all this to make the point that his view of the secret technology that the American Air Force and aerospace entities had at the time, and even to now, he said were 50 years. What we're doing in the desert is 50 years advanced. Yeah, here we go. This is, someone's put a nice quote here. We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we can already do. Ben Rich, second director of Lockheed Skunk Works, that was in 1993, alumni speech, UCLA. That was what I was mentioning to you there. And yeah, not the first crazy quote that he did. So these are the kinds of people, Corso, Helia, Chaim Escher, and to large degree even Trump and Ben Rich and John Lear and I mean, how many more respectable people with the highest levels of military clearance who are sound of mind need to come forward and tell us, look, not only is there secret technology going on here, but there could even be an important consideration for humanity in terms of exopolitics to begin thinking about what it must be like to have some other beings beyond humanity. And again, we're asking this now with AI, so it's great that we frame this concept that we're not the only intelligent things in this universe and start to think about how do we relate with other beings. So, real or not, whether these highly credible military people can be trusted. Now, you see, people like Helia and Corso, they put their they put their whole careers on the line in a sense. Corso obviously didn't know that a lot of his things were going to come out through freedom of information, but he wrote books and all kinds of things. So, to tell the truth, they really had to put their whole careers and families and everything on the line to basically bring this kind of truth out. And we keep, even though the Pentagon is saying, yeah, these things, we don't know what they are, and they've just fed us the same crap that they fed us from 1947. We're still a bit bamboozled by this concept, and we really need to kind of dig into it, because if we don't, the military slowly starts to make a plan around us that we're not a part of, and that's the scary part of continuation of government. If we let them, they will make plans that are not based on any kind of law that we agreed to. And these are supposed to be people that are acting in our name, on our behalf, in our interests. I'm not just talking about the American military government, because there is an international component to this as well. It's not like, oh, just the UFOs are only in America. They're in Russia, they're in China, they're in the EU. Go look at the French. They've got some amazing stories and really fantastic reports and studies that they're a lot more open. The South Americans, let's give a round of applause to Chile and Argentina and Brazil these days, who have been putting out very openly information about anything that shuts down an airport or flies past a radar, or they're not shy about this kind of thing. With a good constitution, our minds can handle these big questions about not being the only intelligent life on this in this existence. But if we treat it like children and we can't get the whole picture, then continuation of government is going to come and give us their version of what is real and what must happen and what is, of what we must think and do. And, as I said, a small percentage of these phenomena, even in 1940s and 50s and even today, the highest ranking people and most trustworthy people and whoever you want to look at say, we don't know what these things are. They appear to have been with us for a very long time. We're not sure that they're a threat. Yet, the ones feeding you the narrative, the UAP rebranding, that's all threat. Aerospace, ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Program. ARO, with a AA, All Domain Anomaly Research Office, which had the ORSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Applications Program. That's what they're doing now. That's the 2020s. We're trying to apply science to the military so that we can defend ourselves against these aliens, because, the people lying to us since 1940 whatever tell us that they need more money and secrecy. And that's really where we come to the conclusion of Storytime 8. Is just, it really all stares us in our face when we start to poke and prod at the continuation of government. The secrecy, the illegality, and the breakaway aspect of this group of Huberts that have a technology far beyond what we as civilians have, that belittle our choice to define our own destiny. That's really a big problem. And whether you have any public crisis, take the most recent one that we've had, the health crisis with, let's just say, the recent virus, because we're going to be putting this up on YouTube. But, that's also had a lot of big question marks. 9/11 had a lot of big question marks. JFK had a lot of big question marks. These deep events are the same people that are planning continuation of government. Are they to be trusted? My answer is flatly no. And you can see it through the sham that is the Senate hearings on UAPs. It's the same tired old information that they've been feeding us since the crash somewhere in the Nevada deserts. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start to just wind it down there. Let me see if I can get any of your questions if you've dropped them in the chat. If not, as always, feel free to send us an email. That's primematterpodcast@gmail.com. We'll put up our socials. We'll drop some links to some of the documents we've had a look at. And I hope that this has been really eye-opening to try and ponder on these deep and really hidden aspects of our day-to-day reality. Whilst we're going at work, these people are planning all kinds of things with advanced technologies, with information about the origins of maybe humanity and our place in the universe. Like, how, I don't want to say evil, but just how patronizing is it for them to think that we're not as humans, ready to know where humans fit in the grand scheme of things. The waving of the national security wand can only keep us from the truth for so long. Although it's almost taken us 100 years to get disclosure, because, some argue that militaries have been dealing with this even before World War One. But the whole point of the matter is, whether it's a Foo Fighter or a UFO or a UAP or Ezekiel's burning wheels in the sky or a Vimana or just something you see on your porch in the sky, there is definitely something real. That every report has said. And it's important that we get involved in that discussion. And not only that, we have to get involved in this discussion because they're running away with it and making plans behind our back. And if they read this wrong and they're shooting at something that is vastly more intelligent than us, then that's a problem. And if the first contact we make with a foreign intelligence is to attack them, I mean, what kind of politics is that? We need to not put defense or exopolitics in the hands of the military. Everything to them as a hammer would be a nail, So this is why we have to involve ourselves with the discussion. And this is why it's my pleasure to bring to you guys story time number 8 this Sunday. I hope you guys all have a fantastic start to your week. We'll be putting this up on YouTube and the Prime Matter Podcast YouTube channel. So if you missed bits and pieces, or you want to just check out some of the info that we put up, by all means, go and check it out there. Thank you all for joining me. Feel free to send me your comments and questions. We'll add them in for our next show. For those of you in the Discord, you're always welcome to jump in live and ask your questions directly there. But yeah, I just want to wish you a lot of truth, love, and light. Great strength for the week ahead. And just again, thank you so much for joining me with this really important but tricky subject. It's not one that you can just, in a very short conversation, wrap it all up and show all the documentation and get a sense for the secret apparatus that holds us in the dark. It's taken nearly 8 story times to kind of make this picture a little bit clearer, and it goes further still. So stick around for next week's show. It's going to be great. We're going to have a good time, as always, telling you the funky stories that basically make up our mysterious reality. So, guys and girls, as always, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Peace out, and as always, catch you for the next episode of good old story time. We'll be playing games and doing a whole bunch of other stuff during the week. So as always, check out our social media and all these good things. And from me to you, have a very, very fantastic time ahead. Until the next one. Peace out.